left off in the last part that we left off talking about was the fact that we will be judged for our giving. And that's important for us to understand that um, the one who owns the property, which is God, will hold every steward accountable for what he did with what God owned. And so um, we saw a couple of scriptures where we saw that we will be judged for our giving, okay? Um, we should never be ashamed of the amount that we give to support the work of the church. As it continues to reinforce what we established early on, is that we should give as we're prospered and able. And so when we give as God prospers us and as he gives us the ability, we can be confident in knowing that we don't have to be ashamed when we stand before him and what we've given to support the work of the church, okay? If we are truly faithful stewards, then we know that we'll be rewarded at that time that we must stand before him in judgment, okay? Now, the next thing we need to establish is not only is it every Christian's responsibility to give to support the work of the church, we also need to understand that our giving must be done with regularity. It has to be done with regularity. Giving can't be done as an afterthought or as a sporadic thing, because the work of the church has to be done on a consistent basis. And so giving can't be sporadic in nature. It has to be done with regularity. The church does not have the opportunity to go to its bill collectors or its debtors, I'll put it that way, debtors, and say, well, finances were down this month, so we need you to bring that light bill down. Or we can't go and say, well, our finances hadn't been where they should be for the last 6 months, and so we need to readjust what you take from us. Now, one big thing that happened, and some of y'all may remember this, back in at the beginning of the century, in the decade of the 2000s, there was a big housing boom, and if y'all remember, houses were very inexpensive. Mortgage rates were very inexpensive, and people were buying houses, but they were also, we saw in the beginning of the 2000s, particularly down here in the South, we saw the rise of mega churches, or churches growing. And just like the housing boom happened, you had a lot of congregations building new facilities. And what happened was, just like with the housing market, a lot of those loans that were being made were subprime loans. And those people ended up getting into trouble. And of course, when we went into around 2008, 9, when we went into that recession, you saw a lot of houses getting foreclosed on because the loans were made to people who really probably shouldn't have been getting mortgages. Well, it also hit churches real bad. It hit churches real bad, and there were a lot of churches that had built new facilities that ended up having to abandon those facilities. Now, one such church, and it actually was a compilation of both, and this is always something that any pastor, or in some of these big churches where it's not just a pastor, it's a group a leadership group that leads the church. Um, Biggest fear is whenever you step out there and you start to do new facilities, you your prayer is that you look, we got to pay for this, okay? Um, but one such church that went through that, and they ended up having to give up their church, but it was actually a combination of both the membership declining, and part of the membership declining was kind of what the pastor did. It's a church, and y'all have seen it before. If you've ever gone to Atlanta, up I-20, right as you coming out of Conyers, there is a humongous church on the left. It's called Springfield Church now. It's right as you're coming into Conyers. If you're going to Atlanta, if you're going west on I-20, it's on your left. And it is a humongous edifice. I mean, it is big. That church now is Springfield Church, which is a predominantly African-American congregation. But they came about that church because of the pastor that was there prior to that. Before that, that church was called Church in the Now. If you've ever gone to Atlanta, I'm telling you, you passed it. And Church in the Now was one of those churches that they built during that big boom. But they lost a lot of their members, and they ended up they lost the church, lost the building. But part of that was because of some of the failures of their pastor then. Their pastor had some moral issues and came out and was unapologetic about them. And a lot of the members left. He came out as homosexual and said that it was all right. And of course, half the church left, so they lost the church. But that was just one example that I gave you. There were many who lost their church because they could no longer pay those mortgages. And I'm saying all of that and describing all of that to y'all because never make any mistake about it. Finances and stewardship are important because just like you have bills at your house, the church has them. And most of the time they're the same bills, and most of the time they're more expensive, okay? Just to let y'all know, we got a letter. I can let y'all know, I mean, it's church business, we're going to handle it, but we got a letter last week from our insurance company informing us that our insurance deductibles were going up, that they were taking our deductibles up. So deacons and trustees, y'all make sure y'all at the meeting on Monday, because we're going to have this to discuss. Our deductibles were going up to some ungodly levels, like $10,000 deductibles. Yes. $5,000 deductibles. And it's about 3 areas that the deductibles were going up in. I think the highest one was $10,000. And I'm saying to myself, well, if we got a $10,000 deductible, the darn whole church will have to be destroyed for us to be $10,000, that's insane. And then it said also, and we want to let you know that your premium will be going up $2,021. So you're going to raise our deductible, and you're going to take our premium up another $2,000. So like I said, most of the time, the church goes through the same things that we go through in our homes, except it's on a bigger scale. Because I know at my house, if my insurance company wrote me and said it's going up $2,000, we packing up. Ain't no way. And so we have to remember that, and we have to remember that that's why our giving cannot be sporadic. It can't be a sporadic giving. You do good for a while, and then you stop, okay? And so stewardship and giving must be done with regularity. Now, the Bible points out to us and gives us an example of when we should, when giving should be done, the regularity of it. Okay? So let's look at some of that. First, let's look at what the Bible says through the Apostle Paul in the book of 1 Corinthians. That's the first place that we see it, in 1 Corinthians, where we deal with the regular. So we're talking about giving regularly. Paul tells us how regular it should be. All right. 1 Corinthians 16. 1 Corinthians 16. Somebody read, when we get to the 16th chapter, somebody read verses 1 and 2. All right. So we see Paul lay it out to the church at Corinth. He said, listen, I'm telling you the same thing I told the church at Galatia. So I'm not telling y'all something different than I'm telling the other churches, okay? Concerning this collection, just like I told the churches at Galatia, I want y'all to know, on the first day of the week, set aside something, okay? Now listen, I might not get there till the 5th day of the week. Don't wait till I come to take up the collection. When I come, it ain't time to take up the collection. That's what Paul is saying here. When I come, ain't, oh goodness, Paul here, y'all. Reggie, go get the basket. On the first day of the week, every one of you, notice that, every one of you, y'all see that? Not some. Not the ones who have jobs. Every one of you lay aside something. And then we see him reinforce what we've already learned. As what? He may prosper. Y'all remember we talked about this early on when we started teaching this. Some of us are still in dues mode. Yeah, you're in dues mode. You still paying $20 dues to church every week. We were paying that in 1968. You've been prospered over and over and over again, but you still, because you set, because that's my dues, it's $20 every week. But you make $2,000 a week, I know, but my dues is $20 every week. So Paul makes it clear, as you have prospered, as you prospered. Sometimes in congregations, there's some of us in congregations who have been prospered more than the tithe. You've been prospered more than the tithe. You have. You have. Always remember, and I heard this talk a long time ago, and this is what I subscribe to. The tithe is the minimum. It's the beginning point. And that's how we have to look at it. That's where we begin. Okay? Listen to this. We're talking about giving with regularity. Giving should be both a thoughtful process and one that is organized. Notice Paul said, do this before I come. Don't wait till I get there and try to take up the congregation. Take up the collection. That's going to cause our. When I come there, I'm coming for this. Already have that taken care of. That's how disorganization happens. We try to do something. No. Giving should be thoughtful and organized. God's people should prayerfully consider what they have been given, E-N. What they have been given, not giving. God's people should prayerfully consider what they have been given, and how in turn they should give. How I've been blessed is how I ought to give. Tell the truth, y'all. Tell the truth to yourself. Can you honestly say, I give as I've been blessed? You ain't got to answer it out loud. For all that we have is his. Christians worship God through our disciplined giving. See, it takes discipline. I'm coming back, Marion. It takes discipline to set aside on the first day of the week that offering. That takes discipline. Because here's why I say it takes discipline. Because if you're not disciplined, the devil will always make sure something comes up that requires your money. Something else. So that he can keep you from giving to advance the work of God. He'll always make sure something comes up. If you're not disciplined in your giving, if you don't say that, no, this has been set aside for God, the devil will, something will always come up. I'm going to come to you. I got Marion first. I was telling First Lady last night, we were talking, we were laying there last night, and I said, you know what, I hate when payday come. And she said, what? And I said, no, I ain't talking about payday where I get paid. I'm talking about payday where I done bought something, and now it's time to pay them folks. It's payday for them. And I said, well, and she said, what you talking about? I said, you know, last year we got these floors done, and we got them done for 12 months, no interest. Well, guess what? 12 months is in 2 months. Payday is coming for them folks, and I got to pay them. And what I said, the reason I said I didn't like it, because I had just got back my little couple of dollars from the taxes. And it wasn't but a couple, but guess what? Payday here. And I ain't finished paying them yet. I said, I didn't even let it sit in the account. It came to the direct deposit. I hurry up and send it right on out. Because I know if I let it sit in there, something going to happen. Huh? Either something else going to come get it, or I'm going to see some chick that I want. Well, that's right, and I'm going to spend it. Ain't got no business spending it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I know what you're finna. Go ahead. You can. Some of y'all might not been there. Some of y'all were there. Go ahead. Way more. For the preacher. Did y'all go? Reg, I know you remember. Did you go with us? It was in that yeah, it was in a doctor's office. Do you remember what a doctor's office? Do you remember? Did you go? You didn't go with us that night? No, it's in Millen. Mm-hmm. You remember? Yeah. It's in a doctor's office. They ended up not staying there long. I can't remember their name. But they didn't stay there long. Then they ended up moving to Statesboro. because the pastor called me a couple of years after that, and yeah. You know what? I think it was. I think it was. I think it sure was. Y- yes, yes, yeah. So yeah. So what? Right. So what Marion was saying, because that's what they took up an offering from the congregation. I guess that was the one that would stay at the church, and then they said, now we're going to take up an offering for the preacher. And officers, y'all know what I always tell y'all and teach y'all. We're not depending on the offering to what our responsibility to the preacher is our responsibility. No matter what comes from an offering, it's already set. That's already set. As a matter of fact, most of the time, when we have a guest preacher here, I tell Martha, have that to me before he even gets here. Before he even gets here. So yeah, you're right, yeah. And a lot of times I've never witnessed this myself in person, but I've heard it and I've seen it where a collection is taken up and then the preacher will come back and say, that ain't enough. Yeah, that ain't, no, I ain't do that. I've never done that. Yeah, no. No, mm-mm. Yeah, that's different. That's different. That's different. If deacons say at the end of that and they say send by money, what that came from was people sending their money to church because they weren't able to come. I'm talking about when they say this ain't enough, we need to take up another offering. We need to take up another offering. So I've seen that before. That was the first time that I witnessed that and been a part of that. But I've seen that before. But again, what Paul is saying here, that's disorganized. That is disorganized. And he's saying what he's teaching the church at Corinth and he's teaching us is giving has to be done regularly. It has to be purpose and thought put behind it. And it needs to be done in an organized manner. It needs to be done in an organized manner. Yes, ma'am, Leah. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. And so, and so we must be disciplined givers. We must be disciplined in our giving. Just like you listen, what did we talk about Sunday? What did we talk about Sunday? We talked about the discipline of giving. And like I told you on Sunday, giving is a spiritual discipline. Just like you need to be disciplined in your prayer life, just like you need to be disciplined in your Bible reading, just like you need to be disciplined in how you treat people. All of those are spiritual disciplines that you learn and that you practice to help you grow spiritually. Well, if you don't give, you're not practicing the spiritual discipline of giving. Giving is a spiritual discipline, and we must learn to be disciplined givers. No, I don't have it. All I have left is what I got to take on the first day of the week to give to the Lord. Mm-hmm. When it comes to that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was talking about all those spiritual disciplines. Right. 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 And again, Trisha, it goes back to a lot of people, their thinking is off because they first of all look at it as it's theirs. It's theirs to give. They don't look at it as it belongs to God and God lets you manage it. They don't look at it like that. And then number two, they have a bad habit of trying to say, I'm not giving my money to that church because they ain't doing right. It's not up to you to decide. Because listen, imagine if just in this small little bit of us here, and every one of us, if I came and said, hey, y'all, we got a windfall of this many $1,000, what y'all want to do with it? If we let every one of y'all tell us what y'all wanted to do, good Lord. Listen, in your own house, between you and your spouse, if you come and say, we got this, hey, look, we got this back, this came back, we got a refund from this, well, I think we need to put it, I can't speak for everybody. I'm just saying in a house that I know, we got this much back. And I think we need to put it in the savings account. How much am I going to get? Well, we need to put it in the joint savings account. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. It's a matter of, like you said, it's a heart condition, and it's a matter of, like Trisha was saying, that preacher said, a matter of obedience. And again, and really, when you look at what Paul is saying, Paul is in many ways reinforcing what God has already told us, that we ought to give him our first fruits, not what's left, our first fruits. Paul is saying, do it on the first day of the week. Do it on the first day of the week. I want it done because I want collections and giving to God to be done purposely, and I want it to be done in an organized manner. I want it to be done in an organized manner. Yes, sir. And, and Deacon Jones, to most mature Christians, and as they're maturing, that's not an issue to them. Um, but for many, it's just, you know, that is one area that we are that I believe God tests. Not everybody, because see, somebody like you, God don't test you with that. But for people who hadn't arrived at that point, that's an area that God tests them so much in, and they continue to fail the test. Because God is saying, trust me. Trust me. But I only have this much. I know. I gave it to you. It's mine. Now trust me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bigger bonds. Mm-hmm. 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 And have right. He said, I know what I'll do. I'll build bigger barns to store my stuff. And the thing is that is another lesson in that parable, because that was a parable of Jesus. And that is another lesson in that parable. But the more interesting thing in that parable was, what we need to learn is, okay, you spend all that time trying to build up everything for you, and the Lord came to him and said, you fool, this night, this very night, your soul will be required. then who gonna spin up your stuff? Because you know, I mean, like, I don't say, how people say you can't take it with you? I don't say that, because you can. You can take it with you. If you, listen, Deacon Griffin, you can tell Thelma and Gip and them, I want y'all to go to the bank, draw all my money out, and put it in that casket with me when they come by. I want them to see all them thousands, me wrapped around all of it. You can take it with you, brother. Well, what I was going to say, you can take it with you, but you can't spend it. So I don't tell people they can't take it with them no more. You can take it with you, but you can't spend it. Yeah, it was a joke. Yeah, it was some joke. Yeah, I wrote him a check. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, cash that check. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, exactly. So, listen, might make us all want to rethink about sending folk flowers. Can't smell them. Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing, because I know a lot of times that's what families do. You get a bunch of flowers, we all split them up, take them home, because that person, them flowers ain't for them, because yeah. Listen to this. There are 4 characteristics of stewardship that are found in this passage of Scripture. And these attributes underscore the importance of managing God's resources wisely. First of all, stewardship and our giving must be periodic. Periodic. Next, it must be personal. Let each one lay aside. It's got to be personal. I would always, when our kids were little, we give them something to put into church, but that was to teach them. Once they got jobs, even though they was working little part-time jobs at Chick-fil-A or whatever, now is you need to give out your check, okay? It's got to be personal. You can't give for them. They need to give. It's from them. It's proportionate. Giving must be proportionate. By that, we mean each gift needs to be proportional to how each giver has been prospered. Each gift must be proportional to how that giver has been prospered. Remember what we talked about? Like I told y'all Sunday, we talked about in Bible study, and like I told the congregation on Sunday, God, listen, when God gives, he wants not equal amount, but equal sacrifice. So when we give as we've been prospered, we're obeying God, and we're doing it in proportion. Everybody may not be able to give like Deacon Curtis, but in proportion they should be. And that's what God looks at, in proportion. And finally, it should be purposeful. It should be purposeful. Paul did not want to take any time away from teaching and ministering to ensure that the offering, he wanted the offering to already be done. Okay? This is why we take a weekly offering in our churches, so that we do not have to worry whether or not we can afford to pay the bills and send money to the mission field. If believers take God's disciplined approach, they can focus their energies on doing his work and building his kingdom. Focus on his work and building his kingdom. Okay? And this act should be repeated. Okay? And so it needs to be done with regularity, not sporadically. Not sporadically. You give today and then you don't give something again for 3 months. Okay? Now, Paul writes this, and he's reinforcing something that was already established in the Old Testament. Not necessarily as it relates to giving, but to the regularity of certain things in the kingdom and how regular certain things ought to take place in the kingdom. For example, in the book of Leviticus, and let's go ahead and turn there and we'll look and see what we're talking about there. Leviticus, I think I told y'all 23. Leviticus 23, let's go there right quick. And this is to parallel where that comes from. Paul ain't just making this up, okay? Come on the first day of the week. All right, 23. Somebody read verses 5 and 6. All right, so here in Leviticus, we see God establishing certain days, and he prescribes what they ought to do on those days. Okay? And those days came with what? Regularity. They came with regularity. Okay? They came with regularity. Go back to 25. The 14th day of the first month, he prescribed that day. So when we see Paul speaking to the church at Corinth, he's saying on the first day of the week. Okay? We see in the 6th verse, on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then he gives instructions. For 7 days, eat unleavened bread. So we see the regularity that God is prescribing. So what Paul is coming up with in this letter to the Corinthians is nothing new. In other words, they ought to already have been accustomed to that. Certain things occur on certain days and at certain times with certain regularity. Okay? So they should have been accustomed to that. Somebody read 24. Let's look at 24. Convocation. Again, we see a prescribed time and a prescribed activity. A prescribed time and a prescribed activity. Okay? You shall have Sabbath rest, and you memorialize that rest by blowing trumpets. Man, when you go through the book of Leviticus, it's all kinds of stuff. Somebody read 34. Hold on. 34? The 15th day. All right? So again, regularity and activity. He tells you when to and what to do. And when you go on reading that, on the first day there should be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on that day. 7 days you'll offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. On the 8th, God lays it out. And so the whole purpose is that the people know, and they relate to, on certain days we do certain activities. And so when Paul tells the church at Corinth this, he's reminding them, so they're familiar with this. Because since God had brought them out of Egypt, they had been doing certain things on certain days. Okay? And so it's important for us to remember that, okay? Now, the necessary implication is that these things should be done on that day as often as it comes. And so we see that here. As often as the first day comes, we ought to have set something aside. And on that first day, we ought to give it to the Lord. Okay? The lesson says we use the same kind of language today. If we say the club meets on the second Tuesday of the month, you expect it to meet every month at that time, right? If your employer says you will be paid on the last day of the week, you expect to be paid on the last day of every week. This was just funny. I just got to tell this. This was just so funny to me. It was a little video where a dude was saying that he had just gotten a new job, and and the lady told him he was gonna make $15 an hour. Y'all saw this video, and so he said, he worked the hour, and he was looking for the lady. And he said, but she didn't come around, so no big deal. So, I was a little upset, but I just kept on working. He said, next thing you know, I done worked 2 hours, and she still ain't came. And then he went on and on up to 3, and then finally after 3 hours he left and said to the lady, where you going? He said, I done worked 3 hours and you hadn't paid me. And she said, you get paid at the end of the week. You get paid at the end of the week. Well, he said, no, you didn't say that. You said I get paid $15 an hour. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that just made me think about that. Oh, those day laborers? Oh, okay. Yeah. yeah. You gotta see, he was so funny. It was like, wow. Likewise, 1 Corinthians 16:2 clearly means to give on the first day of every week. Give on the first day of every week. Okay. All right, so we see that. All right, so our giving must be done with regularity. If we're stewards and proper stewards, we got to give regularly. All right, each give the first day of the week. But also, we must understand that our giving should be tied with our attendance. Our giving tied with our attendance. If God has told you and you have purposed in your heart to give as you have been prospered, when you miss worship meetings, what happens? That's something for you to ask. But you still give it as you prosper, Tammy. Tammy said, givelify. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. So, lesson points that out. Many church members fail to give as they have prospered because they miss worship meetings, then do not make up later for what they failed to give when they miss. This is just one of the many problems involved with missing. For example, suppose you prosper and you purpose in your heart to give $50 a week. If you miss a Sunday and then just keep the $50 that you should have given, then you have disobeyed God's command to give as you have been prospered. Now, you know what? And that's right here, Malachi 3, it says it. Right after it says that, in effect, listen, I wasn't going to read that, but since you said it, Cheryl, let me keep reading. You prospered, but you did not give accordingly. In effect, you just stole $50 from God. Reference Malachi 3, 8 through 10. Now, a lot of people will hate, oh, man, I'm going to tell y'all something. If you tell a lot of people in the congregation that, they'll get mad with you. Yeah, I think I did, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I did. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, it sure was. And yeah, I sure did, yeah. And I remember when I preached that sermon, I tell you that two faces stand out to me. One of them, God bless her memory, Miss Arzina Lee and Ruth Evans. I remember their face when I said, because I got up to preach the sermon and I said, somebody's been stealing from the church. Oh, no. Oh, no. And then, of course, we went right on into Malachi 3 and 10 and 8. And then people were like, oh. No, but it's still true. It's still true. They ain't stealing as you think they're going into the treasury, but what they're doing, they're stealing by keeping it in their pocket. Yeah. And I think I did say, yeah, some of you driving stolen cars. Because you done stole money from God to pay that car note. Some of you wearing stolen clothes. Because you stole from God to buy that blouse, that outfit. Yeah, people don't look at it like that. But in effect, it is what it is. So we've obeyed God's command to give as we've been prospered when we do that. Because even if you're not here, you still been prospered. When we take off, and we ought to thank God for this, right? When we take off, God don't. Now listen, I'll be the first one to tell you, because in a few weeks, we're going to go on vacation. In a few weeks, we're going to start taking vacations, right? We're going to start going. So we may not be here on that Sunday. Thank God he don't take a vacation. So the same way that we promise God to give as we've been prospered, it's okay, go on vacation. Like Tammy said, you got your smartphone with you. www.philipgrove.org. Just hit the link. It'll take you straight to Givelify. You can still do. Or if you like, you can wait till next week. Huh? Yeah, or right. You know you ain't going to be here the week before. You can pay it ahead. Right. So our regularity includes our giving and attendance. They ought to be tied. And even when we're not attending, we ought to still give, because our giving ought to be given regularly. Okay? Malachi 3, 8 through 10. Malachi 3. Let's go ahead and read it. Malachi 3. Even this whole nation, all of y'all, that's what he was in effect saying, all of y'all, even this whole nation. In what way have we robbed you? And clearly God says in tithes and offerings. Listen to this. This is David Jeremiah saying this. We put God first. When you put God first, things begin to happen in your life that you will never experience until you do. When you put God first, things will begin to happen in your life that you will never experience until you do it. When we give, we prove God's promise. Doing what God tells us to do prompts him to pour out his blessings on us. Remember what I told you the other week? Giving, it opens and it invites God's favor into our lives for him to do those supernatural things. Not because he's doing it like a payback. It's not a tit for tat. It's not a quid pro quo. It's not that. What it's doing is God is honoring your obedience. It's not he paying you back, because I can't pay Leah back something that belongs to me. So he's not paying you back because you gave. What he's doing is he says, I'm honoring your obedience. I'm honoring your obedience. When we give, we profit from God's provision. Y'all, my pastor used to say this. I remember the first time I heard it, I just chuckled, laughed. Y'all remember you say, you can't beat God giving. And Reverend Smith would say, you can't beat him taking either. That used to make me laugh. He said, you can't beat God giving, and you can't beat him taking either. We profit from God's provision. In ways and in places we never dreamed of, God provides for our needs. When we give our tithes and our offerings, we praise God's name. We could never repay the Lord for what he has done, but we can honor him in our obedience. So that's what God is honoring. That's what he's blessing, your obedience. When we give our tithes and offerings, we personalize God's word. God cares about how we internalize and respond to his commands in our daily lives. Let me add something to that. Have y'all ever really thought about that? Here's what I mean, that God cares about how we internalize things too. Have y'all ever thought about that? A lot of times, and we'll talk about this, we're going to get into this. A lot of times when God commands us to do stuff, we do it, but we do it more so out of a guilty obedience, or what's another word? I ain't going to say reluctant. It's because that's what I'm supposed to do. Does that make sense? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. Not out of a obedience, Lord, thank you. Or I'm doing right, a love. You know what I'm saying? That makes sense. It's out of, but that's what I'm supposed. Like when you were growing up and your mama told you to do something you really didn't want to do it. You did it maybe out of fear, or because that's another thing, we do stuff out of fear. Or you did it out of, It's like I've told y'all before on occasions, one of the greatest things about what Jesus did is he willingly shed his blood. See, I think we forget that he willingly shed his blood. Obligation, we'll do it. But, I'm supposed to do it because I'm a Christian, rather than, you know what, it's the right thing to do. Right, I want. It's hard, and one of the greatest places you see that is in Jesus' submission to the cross. His will and his flesh didn't want that, but he willingly shed his blood. When he said, not my will, but thine be done, He willingly shed his blood. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it could be some people could. You know what? I could, yeah, because God could give all of us a command in here, and then truthfully, we may all obey it, but we may all obey it with different motives behind our obedience. I believe that's possible. Yeah. So it could be a lot of those things. But when Jesus, so God cares how we internalize things. I know you don't want to do it. I know you don't. Sometimes that's what God is saying to us. I know you don't want to do it. But are you going to obey me because you love me? I know for you, listen, yeah, for you, Mary, it's next to impossible. But will you obey me and depend on my power to allow you to do it? See, that's internalizing things. So God cares how we internalize things. That's why, and we're going to get into that later on, that's why Paul talks about God loving a cheerful giver. We're going to talk about that next time, you know. So God cares how we internalize things. You know, listen, I think we've talked about this before. You could do the right thing the wrong way. You could do the right thing the wrong way. Remember I told you can never do something wrong the right way. Always remember that. You can never do something wrong the right way, but you can do something right the wrong way. Yes, ma'am. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. Because see, when we fail to give him the 10% and we keep 100, that 100 is cursed. But when we give him his 10%, that 90 that we keep is blessed. No, that's right. That's right. Right. Because he just said it right here to Malachi, tell them they're cursed with a curse. So so the 90% that God says is mine, but I'm going to let you keep, that 90% is blessed, and it's more blessed than the 100% that I choose to keep all for myself. When I don't give God his at least his 10, then that whole 100% is cursed. Yeah, you get to keep 100, but it's cursed. And I'm telling y'all, if you think about it in your own life, when you weren't a tither or you weren't giving like you supposed, think about it. Just think about, I'm telling you, I can think. I can think back right now. I'm telling you, yes. Was keeping it all to myself, and I was like that cartoon, just running in place. You know, I was thinking about this morning, getting ready to go to work, because one of the things, I was talking to my son yesterday, and I was telling him, because it's hard to get these young folk to think about retirement. You know, I'm telling you, it's hard. Yes, right. But in their defense, and I told him, I was like that too. I was just like that. At 27, what you telling me about retirement? I'm 27 years old. What you telling me about retirement for? And so I was telling him, I said, you know, Emmanuel, I know right now that ain't what you thinking about, and I know you're not, because I was asking him, you know, saying, you know, hey, man, you putting something aside for retirement, right? You taking advantage, because the company you work for, most of these companies now, they do match. They're going to match your 401k. So I'm like, take advantage of that. They're matching it, you know, and I said, I know you ain't thinking about that right now. I said, because when I was your age, I didn't. I said, but right now, I am at the doorstep of that, and I'm thinking, my thought process is, ooh, it's going to be enough for me and my wife to be able to live off of and keep that we don't have to worry. And he was like, Dad, what about, well, you going to get Social Security? I said, well, first of all, I'm still a long ways from Social Security. And number two, that ain't that much money. Not, so just talking about that. But here's the thing about that. I was thinking this morning, I said, Lord, I remember working 4 jobs. Yes. No, you can ask I worked at DJJ. And on the weekends, I would leave DJJ because I worked at Dillard's too. I would go to Dillard's. And I would go to Dillard's from 5 to 9. I would leave Dillard's at 9, go home, change into my security guard uniform, and I was a security guard from 11 to 7. And then on Saturdays, I ain't have to go to Dillard's till about 1 o'clock. So I would go sleep, and I would work at Dillard's from 1 to 9, get off at 9, go home, change into my security guard uniform, and go work security guard at the hotel from 11 to 7. And then on Sunday, tell the truth, yeah, I was too tired to go to church because I had to be back at Dillard's at 1 o'clock on Sunday. And then on Monday, I went back to DJJ. And then on drill weekends, on the weekends I had to drill, yeah, I would go. I would get off at 7 o'clock, leave straight from the security job, go to drill till 4 o'clock, get to Dillard's at 6, work there from 6 to 9, then 11 o'clock, go. Yeah. Yes. Right. But I'm telling y'all, I was doing all of that, and I was like Wile E. Coyote. I was running in place. Wasn't getting nowhere. But it's because even with all the jobs and all them streams of income, I wasn't doing right by God. Right, yeah. Sending $20 to Palmer Grove. Sometimes wouldn't even send that. Yeah, I sent him $20. Got 15 jobs, like got 15 job mine. Send him $10. So, but I'm saying that to say that it doesn't matter until you honor God with what He's blessed you with. I don't care how many streams of income you got. It's gonna be like Haggai said, like putting your money in a bag with holes. Yeah. It's like putting your money in a bag with holes because God has already said you're going to be cursed with a curse. You're cursed with a curse because you robbed me. All right. Any questions, y'all? We're going to cut off right there. Next week. Right, that's right. Next week, we'll